delivering and getting the job done, and it's very pleasing to be a member of this government, working with Jeremy Rockliff and my colleagues in Cabinet on the backbench and to get the job done. We are keen, and we're full of keen as mustard, as they say. We want to get on with the job, deliver for all Tasmanians. Thank you, Speaker.
Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, thank you. I rise this afternoon to make my contribution on the State of the State address, and in doing so I want to open by saying a internally optimistic person would want the opportunity to stand here and speak positively about the contribution by the Premier and the state that we find the state of Tasmania in. However, the responsibility that comes with being in this place and in the Parliament of Tasmania, being leaders for the state of Tasmania, is that we've got to be honest about the circumstances we find ourselves in. And in delivering a response to the status of the state address, we have to share with Tasmanians the reality of where we're at. And in fact, I think honesty and understanding exists in the public community of Tasmania more than it does in the benches of the government. There's no place more important to start than with the state of Tasmania, than with the most recently and significant, serious report put out publicly by Treasury, which is the 2026 Fiscal Sustainability Report. Now, it's really interesting timing, because when I first arrived here, it was only weeks after my arrival that the 2021 Fiscal Sustainability Report was released. And I read it with great interest, concern, but a hope that being a part of this place and being able to work in a parliament together, across the parliament, that we would be able to accept, identify and grab on with both hands what was recommended in that report, and that the government would take action. At that time, I was feeling hopeful about where Tasmania is at with this government. I thought, you know, even though we would like to be in government, we're the opposition, that you've got to take at face value what you first think is likely to happen. But wow. Year on year, month on month, year on year, since being in this place, you get to peel back the reality of what is a facade for this government. Now, in 2021, there were a range of options presented. There was sort of like a moderate, a middle, a lower middle, and then a high response required by government. And it said, although in not an alarmist way, it said this is serious and action must happen. But what was really interesting when I opened the 2026 report is that the tone from Treasury has completely shifted. They rang the alarm bells, they were ignored, and now the tone has been shifted. And I'm actually going to read into the Hansard a position about the difference and why the scenarios in the 2021 report aren't being used now. Often when you have a report, there are scenarios used. When you do the next update, you use those scenarios and you update your position. But the 2021 alternate scenarios effectively provided sensitivity analysis of the core historical trends scenario. But Tasmania's finances have deteriorated significantly since the 2021 Financial Sustainability Report, Fiscal Sustainability Report. In developing the 2026 report, it is considered that these scenarios would not meaningfully assist in understanding Tasmania's current financial situation. Given the need for budget repair, Treasury has instead focused on its own 2026 report on the understanding of the effort that is now required to return Tasmania's finances to a sustainable footing. The 2026 report has separately undertaken sensitivity analysis based on a range of potential revenue and expenditure events. There are serious concerns being presented in a way that is a massive step change just in recent years around the position that the finances were in 2021 and now. There's been some key findings out of that report, and I think it was really disturbing to hear the Treasurer this morning in a context of calling a minister to account who has repeatedly misled Parliament, that a Treasurer would on his feet refer to the Tasmanian finances as manageable, and that in fact the message that he as the Treasurer of Tasmania took out of the Tasmanian Fiscal Sustainability Report, what the message that he took was that he says that Treasury have shared with him through the report that things are manageable. If the Treasurer of Tasmania believes that on reading this report that's the state of the finances in Tasmania, boy are we in trouble. I think across Tasmania, And honestly, on this side of the House, there was an expectation that having Minister Abetz in the Treasury portfolio might actually bring some sense to the Tasmanian management and approach to financial repair. But for him to stand here today and say that what's being presented is manageable is really beyond belief. The key findings out of the report show that Tasmanians' finances are projected to rapidly deteriorate. Doing nothing is not an option. Immediate action is required to stabilise debt before it becomes unmanageable. Budget repair is required over the next 5 to 10 years, so we need short-term action, immediate action, and budget repair is achievable only if action is taken now. Now, in the past, we've been talking about the cost of borrowings, the scale of the debt, the scale of these circumstances in Tasmania, but there's a term that I didn't pick up previously, but I'm now very much aware of, which is peak debt. At the moment, managing Tasmanian finances and this term that the former Treasurer, Minister Barnett, who was just on his feet, keep talking about this pathway to surplus, and that he says that in the previous budget, and in fact it is interesting that it's not being used now, that there was this magical pathway to surplus. Actually understanding when Tasmania gets to peak debt, where we start to actually stop standing still in our management of our finances, is really important. And there is a scary projection of what can happen if peak debt isn't curbed and it actually almost gets to the point where it's beyond the mark of return in terms of Tasmania's finances. So when we stand here today and deliver our response to the State of the State address, we've got to be honest with Tasmanians. We've got to be uncomfortable, and I think we have to be really clear that doing nothing is not an option. And to hear the Premier be applauded by his colleagues and by the Treasurer and just now by the Deputy Premier for putting forward a visionary and a positive and an action State of the State address, again is alarming, because to move some deck chairs in a department which may have had some structural challenges as the response to what is needed and I love how given that in our daily lives we deal with a lot of money, a lot of times, and a lot of documents, $1 billion sounds like a lot of money in this place. So to talk about $250 million sounds like it's significant. But a $250 million correction here presented by this government is a scratch on the surface of what's required and the alarm that's been signalled by Treasury. If this government don't attack the circumstances that they've created, if they're honest about the fact that they can no longer blame COVID, they can no longer blame things that have happened over time, but accept, as Treasury are saying, that it's the result of their actions and their inner decision and their policy positions that have put Tasmania in these circumstances, only then can we start to be responsible and address this. If nothing changes, debt doesn't creep up, it's actually going to explode across Tasmania. The projection by 2040 is that we'll have $146 billion worth of public debt. And that's not debt. There can be positive debt and then sort of heavy debt. Debt that you actually, something that you carry that's returning something to your community can be seen, leverage debt is great. We all have circumstances where we're willing to invest in something because we know it'll bring a return. But where we're just borrowing to stand still, where we're borrowing to pay interest, that's not good debt. And what's happening at the moment is, as a proportion of the Tasmanian budget, we're spending about 2% of state revenue on interest costs. But this document, the 2026 Tasmanian Fiscal Sustainability Report, says that it's possible for that to blow out to be 50% of the revenue brought into Tasmania within 15 years if nothing has happened. That's extraordinary. And in terms of the scale of the health budget in Tasmania, the scale of that debt is almost unsurmountable for future generations. And that's when we're talking about a State of the State report, when we're talking about where Tasmania is at and where we can be at, is what we need to be thinking about. Our kids and their kids and the future of Tasmania, decisions that are made now, that won't impact us. They will impact generations ahead in a place that so many people already today have spoken about the great things in Tasmania, the great reputation that we have had in Tasmania, the beautiful things that it means to be Tasmanian and live a Tasmanian way of life. That will all be lost. The simplicity of the foundational access to good education, good health, good community support, to connectivity and feeling like you are worthy and belonging in a community are all fundamental things. But if at the most core level the economy of Tasmania fails, if it breaks as a result of the inability to be honest and to take action and to care about the impacts of their policy decisions on Tasmanians, then that is not a legacy that I want to be associated with. And I would hope that every member of the government start to look within to see, is that a legacy that you want to be left with? Is that how you want to be remembered for your time in this parliament? Because we are heading to get towards massive debt, massive borrowing costs, and we're also, as a result of that, heading towards increased costs of borrowing and the downgrading of our credit rating. All of those things are going to make things harder in Tasmania. It's hard now. That's going to make it even harder and harder into the future. So at the core of this is the economic circumstances of Tasmania. And I've talked about policy decisions, inaction of this government. They just seem to be the behaviours and the themes of this government. When you look at building Tasmania, you think, oh, that sounds pretty positive. They want to build things. But when they use the examples of the things that they have done which have all failed, they talked about the Nuina. You can't even refuel it because they didn't think that through properly. You talk about the spirits, which Tasmanians love. TT line, they couldn't even get the berth built for the TT line spirits of Tasmania that are due, hopefully, to be on that run by the end of the year. But who can trust this government to make sure that that actually happens? Who can trust that they say what is going to be delivered as a result of that Tasmanians will actually experience and benefit from? You've got businesses in Tasmania, and the Deputy Premier on his feet talked about the importance of business in Tasmania, but you have got entities from the government intentionally, it feels like, but actively in the way of business productivity and growth. You've got challenges with TasWater, you've got challenges with Tas Networks, you've got challenges with TasPorts, you've got challenges around TT Line, you've got challenges with Tas Racing and a minister under pressure. You've got this whole wild idea that it's okay to prey on the pain points of Tasmanians where there are challenges absolutely with the cost of insurance, whether that be in a home or in a business. But you prey on that pain point and you put out a policy in an election around TasInsure knowing that you haven't done the work, knowing that you don't understand the risks, but presenting it as though it's something that can be good for Tasmanians. Then the reports to come out to show that it not only is not going to deliver what you say, a $250 reduction in your premium and lower grocery prices. I mean, that's wild that you would say that, but then there's all sorts of reports that come out now about the risks that you impose on other great Tasmanian entities like the MAIB. Tasmanians want to trust their government. Tasmanians want to trust their leaders, but when you've got this plethora of challenges day on day, week on week, with businesses, good business people, finding it difficult to navigate their way through this government and the government business enterprises, then what is the hope and the opportunity for others in this place? You can announce building Tasmania, but can you actually deliver buildings that are needed in Tasmania? You look at one of the other entities, and something that I interact with regularly through my portfolio mix in primary industries with Tas Irrigation. Now, when I first came into this place, there was legislation brought into the Parliament that was going to support the fact that the Tamar irrigation scheme hadn't met its water sales measure, and so recognising that we needed water at Bell Bay, we would put those two things together, allow Tas Irrigation to deliver industrial water. It would bring through water for the farmers and there'd be a positive outcome. It has taken this government so long to try and deliver that outcome that they are now returning the bonds to farmers. Now, there are a whole range of people in the Tamar Valley that would benefit from the Tamar scheme. Nonetheless, Bell Bay, the precinct there, knowing that at some time in the future, a development there will need water, but this government can't bring it on themselves to figure out that they can future-proof that and support farmers on the way. Just in recent weeks, I have again been talking to beef farmers, berry farmers, grape growers, small producers, large producers, producers that are all being impacted by the promise that was given about water and the lack of this government being able to deliver. There were producers in that region that have invested significantly on the promise of that water coming through and been let down and therefore burdened by the inability of this government. It's a simple thing, but it's another demonstration of this government being amazing in making announcements, raising expectations in the community, and then undermining the credibility, the viability, and sometimes the financial positions of individuals by not being able to deliver. You look at the credibility of this government raising expectations and then taking things away. You don't have to look too much further in my electorate, given that the Tamar scheme is in Bass, a bit closer to the city. There have been some people that have referred here today to the member for Windermere. Don't have to look too far to the raising of credibility around the woeful way they treated the North Launceston Footy Club. In the state of a state of address, you're meant to look back on the year behind to see how you can move forward. If that is the behaviours that this place thinks is reasonable on how you treat people in Tasmania, in our community in Bass, this government has got a lot to learn, but it feels like they don't know how, because it feels like this is just woven into who they are about how they treat people. You look at the way they treated the greyhound industry weeks before the election, physically making written promises with signatures about the support that they had for that industry, cruelly weeks later to rip that out for a political gain and a political protection. The families involved in that industry, the work that happens in our Tasmanian community, the support provided by other industries towards that sector, they are part of the regional Tasmanian fabric. They are great families doing really important things that don't deserve to be treated like that by the Premier or the Government of Tasmania. You look at the salmon industry, again, given commitments just prior to an election, ripped away afterwards, and a government saying, oh, we're going to do a review, it's in your best interests. Now, the industry haven't put up a barrier to that, and we'll go through the process. The announcement just recently of the 2 people to lead that process. But putting commitments in writing and then ripping them away, however you feel about a different sector, whether it's the North Launceston Footy Club, whether it's greyhounds, whether it's salmon, is no way to treat Tasmanians. Tasmania and Tasmanians, Tasmania is the best place to live. We all choose that. Tasmanians, the people that we work with every day, that we are here to support every day, love this place and invest in this place and are determined for a positive future. But to have a positive future in Tasmania, you've got to name up the reality of the circumstances we find ourselves in. I call on the government to make sure that they do that, because Tasmanians expect it. In terms of the future of Tasmania, there is an election coming up, and I want to actually put on the record the importance of education. We've got an incredible candidate in the seat of Rosevears in the north, in Ben McKinnon, who is clear about the importance of education. Having spent 20 years in classrooms, which means not only just working with young people and understanding young people and helping to shape the lives and the potentials and the futures of young people, but also it means that he gets to see into the lives of families, of communities. As a sports teacher and as a music teacher and as a classroom teacher, he gets to see all different parts of our community. He's been out on the doors, he's been listening to people and understanding the important needs of the West Tamar community, and I can tell you that someone like Ben in this place would be incredible. Having the positivity and the deep thinking and the ability to be honest about what's happening in a community and support people in the community is exactly the type of people we need in the Parliament of Tasmania. So my reflection on the state of Tasmania is it's in trouble. This government have been leading Tasmanians down a path where this government think it's okay to kick the can down the road on really important issues like the financial circumstances of this state. What Tasmania needs right now is for this place to cause the government to stand up, to be real, to take action, not just talk about announcements, but to do the hard work. And if you're not willing to do the hard work, allow the Parliament to work together to do that with Tasmanians, because Tasmania is incredible. It has and does have reputations right across the world for some amazing innovations, for some amazing people doing things, whether it be in technology, whether it be creative, whether it be in productivity, whether it be in agriculture, in all sorts of sectors right across Tasmania. But this government every day, every week, every month are just like chipping away at and undermining that reputation and undermining the possibilities for people. They are seeing more people leaving because they don't feel confident about a future here. Back in the day in the 90s, that's what was happening. People were leaving Tasmania, and now people are leaving again. People are concerned about what's happening in Tasmania. They're concerned about the future here in Tasmania, and unfortunately, young people are deciding that maybe they don't have a future here. What could be an incredible future for Tasmania? We could have an incredible renewables renewal for Tasmania. The Deputy Premier talks about how, you know, he sees himself as the grandfather of renewable energy in Tasmania. Well, I can tell you, in the latest quarterly report that came out about new investment and new build in Tasmania, the country is going ahead in leaps and bounds. They are investing amazingly and getting the benefit. Tasmania is at a standstill. We have lost our reputation as the leaders in renewable energy. We are losing the investment that could come with that. Tasmania needs a strong government. It has a strong opposition, and Tasmania needs a positive future.
Tasmania